right. Well, good morning. Well, actually, it's afternoon now, but because of daylight savings time, this is, I don't know about you, but, and for all those folks that don't want to take their kids to the bus in the dark, I understand, but it'd be nice if we would just leave time alone. Okay. Anyway, well, welcome everyone. This is episode 187. We're in 2 Samuel 15. I posted verses 12 through 23, I believe. And I entitled this Being Run Out of Town by Your Son. Being run out of town by your son. My wife read this morning and said, "This is so sad." And I said, "Yeah, it's just starting. This is what Nathan told David was going to happen. Because of what happened with Bathsheba, and there's always going to be war in his house." I don't think he realized that this war was going to be with his own boy. And it's tough. Just a note here, too, because I touched on Ahithophel in verse 12, one of David's counselors, and I got a note from a family member that said Ahithophel was Bathsheba's grandfather, and I looked that up, and that apparently is lore. Anyway, there's no documentation of it. There might be a deduction somewhere, but of all the commentators I looked at, and I looked at a scat of them, one mentioned this as a possibility, and I don't think it has anything to do with the text. I think they're trying to figure out some reason why he's a betrayer of David. And after that, I've noticed that the idea here is you don't need to have a reason to be a betrayer. I then because Ahithophel in verse 12, and Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices, and conspiracy was strong, for the people increased, continuing with Absalom. It tells us about Ahithophel. Listen to this. I'm jumping ahead here. This is chapter 16, verse 23. This guy is something else. It says, "In the counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, was as if a man had inquired at the oracle of God." The guy is as reliable as God. Can you believe that? An oracle of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. And it's amazing, this guy. He is a wise man. Except here, he sides with Absalom against David. And then everybody's looking for a reason. The Bible doesn't have to give us a reason. Ahithophel, just for those that are taking notes, is the Old Testament example of Judas. Now that comes up everywhere. He is the Judas of the Old Testament is Ahithophel. And all we know about Judas as far as why he betrayed him, the 30 pieces of silver was like a sidebar because he just threw it back. It gets into a lot of problems, but essentially the reason why Judas betrayed the Lord is because he was the son of perdition. He was filled by Satan and was in that role to bring about the arrest of the Lord. That is why he's there. You don't need, what I'm saying is the devil doesn't need a reason to do what he does, because that's what the devil does. Judas didn't need a reason to do what he did, because that's what Judas did. And Ahithophel doesn't need a reason, like he's Bathsheba's grandfather, and so he couldn't get over the fact that David had Uriah killed to be Ahithophel. That's not necessary. Betrayers betray. And what we find out, especially in leadership, all men are betrayed somewhere along the line. That's just the nature of the job. So what we have here, this is Ahithophel. Oh, I just want to read one other thing, because later on, Ahithophel is going to say, you got to go and get David right now. He's at his weakest point. We can wipe him out. Hushai, who I mentioned before, comes along, tells Absalom a story about why it's not a good idea. And so here's Ahithophel, who is like an oracle of God, and here's Hushai, who is a plant by David, both speaking to Absalom about his next strategic move to wipe out David. And if he was really going to wipe out David, and God's hand was not in it, he should have trusted Ahithophel, because Ahithophel, whose counsel is like the oracle of God, should have been listened to, and Absalom should have followed Ahithophel, and he would have wiped out David. But he listens to Hushai. And listening to Hushai, Ahithophel knew that everything is over now, because if you're going to follow Hushai, we're not going to win. And then it says this in chapter 17, verse 23, and it says, and when Ahithophel saw that the counsel was not followed, that is, when he said, go get him right now, and Hushai says, no, he's not there in the camp anyway, you'll just be wasting your breath. It said he saddled his ass, arose and got him home to his house, to his city, put his household in order. Okay, so he gets everything in his household in order, and hanged himself and died, and was buried in the sepulchre of his father. That, beloved, is suicide. This is not a guy who is mortally wounded on the battlefield like Saul was, who calls on his armor bearer to run him through, and then falls out his own sword when death is inevitable. This guy, when he realized that he was going to be a traitor to the king, and the king was coming back, realizing that, he hung himself. That's a straight-up suicide, which is also interesting because that's exactly what Judas did. He hung himself, right? Ahithophel hangs himself. They're both betrayers, and I think they're betrayers. I don't have to have an external reason on why they betrayed. In this case, I can just say this was God's plan to allow this bad counsel on the part of Ahithophel, who is ultimately a very wicked man, although a brilliant man. You see, you got to keep those two things together. Let me back up. I've been in school with brilliant men that I don't think were saved. I've been in school with men that I think knew more of the Bible than some guys that are Christians. They have dedicated themselves to learning the Bible in the original languages and to formulate theology, and have read just scores and scores of books and are in a position to teach PhD classes. And who knows? But I'm not convinced they even know the Lord, which would excel a lot of people that are Christians that are in teaching positions. You see, people combine these two as if they connect. They don't connect. All right. Here's Ahithophel. He's a brilliant man. His counsel is as the oracle of God. He ends up committing suicide because he sides against the king. You have to just factor all this in. We're looking at the Bible so we can create a worldview for ourselves as believers, to see the world as God sees it. That's the whole idea. So that's how this starts, about Ahithophel siding against the king. All right? And he's a wonderful counselor. He was as an oracle of God, according to the Holy Spirit here, both for Absalom and David. All right? So just an interesting note. So here we go. It says in verse 13, this is David getting run out of town by his son Absalom. It said, and there came a messenger to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. Yes, many were, enough to divide the kingdom, but not everybody. All right. And he's still the king is the point. David is still the king, but the uprising against him, the rebellion, the insurrection, if you want to call it, is robust. They're gonna try to drive the king out of Jerusalem, and they do. It says, and David said unto his servants and all which were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee. And there it is. We have to get out of here. David is telling everybody that's on his side that we have to run for our lives because my son and those on his side are going to come and kill us. Is this amazing? This is so terrible. David, we read these stories about these guys killing the Philistines and killing the Ammonites and clearing out the Jebusites so you can take Jerusalem as your capital city. And we just say that that's kind of par for the course in military ventures, But this is your own son. I cannot. This gets this. I hope this is resonating with you as I tell you this. This is a horrible story. I told my wife earlier it's going to get worse. And I'll get to it in a minute here. You're not going to believe the counsel Ahithophel told Absalom. The one that speaks as an oracle of God tells Absalom, and I'm going to jump ahead here. He tells Absalom, take the 10 concubines that David left in the palace just to take care of the palace. Take them up on the roof in the sight of all of Israel. Everybody in Jerusalem can see what's going on. Go up there and have intimate relations with all 10 concubines on the roof in the sight of all of Israel. That is the counsel of the guy that speaks as an oracle of God. There's the wisest counselor that you could have for David and Absalom, because Ahithophel knows after you've done this, there will be no forgiveness. That's what he thinks. If I do something this atrocious, David will never forgive me, never forgive you, Absalom. Never, because of what you've done. The shame that you're going to bring to him. Except it doesn't work. David pines for Absalom after he's dead. There's something, it's his boy. And there's just something between David and Absalom. All right. Anyway, so, and you're going to see this develop more. But here it is. He goes on. He says, we got to get out of here. Let's flee, for we shall not escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart. Let's just grab your gold bag and get out. He says, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us. And listen, and this is what David said, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. It's not an overstatement that Absalom is bringing military force against his dad. All right? And the king's servant said unto the king, behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. And that is the way you're supposed to side with the king. This is it. Remember, I said, make sure you always side with the Lord's anointed. And we know what happened to him, but the fact that the Bathsheba event happened and he's brought all this down upon him did not change the fact that he is the Lord's anointed. This is David, the man after God's own heart, the writer of the Psalms, the killer of Goliath, the military victor that extended the reach of Israel all the way to the Euphrates River. This is the one that in the future is going to be co-regent with Christ during the millennium and sit on the throne of David during the millennium. It is the same David. Now, we're seeing him here at a very, 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 very low point. But never forget who we're talking about. This is David, the king of Israel, a type of Christ. All right? That's what we're looking at here. So you say, well, you know what happened to David in the Bathsheba thing. Well, that's it for him. I'm just going to strike him off. Well, there may be people that did that. And we know Absalom here hates him, but God didn't. Is the point? You see, there's just something to gather from this. You side with him. You say, yeah, but he's a broken, fallen man. Yes, he is, but he's a broken, fallen, repentant man. That's what we're looking at here with David. And so even after all that, you could say, well, I'm siding with Absalom against him because of what he did. He should not have done that. Yeah, and you would have been on the wrong side of history because of this. Because I have been all over Timbuktu in recent days. All right, I have driven so many miles. I mean, in the worst traffic, some of the worst traffic in all of the United States is between Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, all right, and then over into New Jersey. Now, it gets worse, of course, because I could still go New York, Boston. That stretch of traffic, and I know it's not Los Angeles, but that stretch of traffic is really, really tough. There's reasons not to drive that. Well, that's where I've been for the last few days. Anyway, and that's why if you check on Facebook, I posted a message from almost 5 years ago during COVID on Romans 13. And one point I want to make again that I mentioned in that message is this, is that the Quakers and the Anabaptists said if the man in leadership is not a moral man, that is he has to be like pastor material, husband of one wife. I'll just keep going that way. All right. If he can't, it's almost like if the leadership can't meet the parameters for eldership, then he can't be the leader of a nation. And then you sat back and I got into a discussion with friends. I said, and if he's not that kind of man, then you can't vote for him. And all I can say is, the only person you can really vote for then is Jesus. And Jesus is not running. He's the only one, because if you're voting for someone, you're voting on whatever you know. All right. But it tells us that the heart of man is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, no matter who you vote for. So there's these Quakers in that side, the Anabaptist tradition, that said he must be a good man. Samuel Rutherford says no, because he understands theologically every man is broken, he's fallen, he's sinful. It's not whether or not he's a good man. Now, we want the best man we can get. I say that. I'm not saying I want some reprobate, but that is not the final criteria. The criteria is, does he keep the law? Is he a law keeper? And for our nation, does he follow the Constitution? That is the criteria. When I say criteria, the standard, the make it or break it position. Not whether or not he has been walking out the roof at night and spies one of his best fighters' wives, takes him to himself, and commits adultery with her. That does not disqualify him from being the king. I know. And I don't know if Rutherford cites that. I don't know. I'd have to read it some more in Lex Rex. But the point is he a law keeper? Does he keep the law? So this event does not disqualify him. So if you're looking at this situation because he's only asked for this because of what happened with Bathsheba, you're on the wrong side of everything. He is the king. You stay with the king. Absalom is the rebel. You might say, well, Absalom is just giving him his just desserts. Don't think that. Absalom is driving the king out of Jerusalem, even though he's a broken man and he's brought this on him. It doesn't change the fact he's the king. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay, let's keep going. So it says in verse 15, and the king's servant said unto the king, behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever the Lord thy king shall appoint. And then in here, this verse 16 is, and it says, and the king went forth and all his household after him. And you want to mark this, you say, well, why is this in the Bible? You don't want to skip over any verse because you say to yourself, well, why did they include something as mundane as this? Verse 16, the middle of the verse. And the king left 10 women which were concubines to keep the house. See that? These are the 10 which are going to show up later that Absalom is going to have intimate relations with in public sight to shame his father. How angry do you have to be with your dad to do this? You see, you can't put all of this on David. Absalom is a grown man here. I mean, we're not saying David is the perfect dad. Wait, let's just back up. I don't even want to go there. I told you about Samuel. The reason that they wanted a king is because Samuel's boys were a bunch of reprobates, and they said, we can't have your boys leading because you've been out judging all of Israel. You've never been home to raise your boys. You left it up to your wife to raise your boys, and now your boys are reprobates, and there's no way they could take your place as judge, Samuel. And so that's what led to give us a king like every other nation. And all of that until finally God says they haven't rejected you, they've rejected me, because there wasn't really, materially speaking, Samuel had not raised sons that are worth it. Now, who's going to say Samuel wasn't a great prophet? One of the greatest in all the Old Testament, right? I mean, he's not John the Baptist, but he's one of the big heavy hitters. But he was not a great dad. Did that disqualify him? So let's say David is not a great dad. Did that disqualify him from being the king? And did that bring the wrath of his boy down him to the place where I am going to injure my dad so much by having these relationships with his concubines in front of all of Israel? This is a lot to take in. I say all of this to say that David is God's anointed, and you stick with him. You stick with God's man is the point. All right, and when you get old, when your sons get older, it's on them. You do your best to raise them, but the men they turn out to be is on them. All right, and hopefully you've equipped them enough. But once they're out of the house and they're on their own, they make their own decisions. Some we like as dads and grandpas, and some we don't. But that's on them, okay? Because now they're their own dad. Just like one time when they were at the house, I was the dad, and that goes for all of us. That's just how it works. All right. So let's keep going. But he leaves the concubines. All right. This is later down the line. This is going to be trouble. And the king went forth and all the people after him and tarried in a place that was far off. And all the servants passed on beside him. And here you go. Who's with David? This is big because his name is not mentioned here. But remember I said that Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, this amazing guy's in charge. The Cherethites and the Pelethites, they're with David. You want to be with these folks. This is like the Praetorian. This is like the special forces. This is like the king's bodyguard unit. It said, and all the servants passed beside him, and all the Cherethites and all the Pelethites and all the Gittites. The Gittites are going to serve under Attai the Gittite, or one of David's generals. So not everybody is, and it doesn't say Joab here, but Joab's with him too. All right. The 600 men which came after him from Gath passed on before the king. All right. So he's not alone, and he's got 600 of the best soldiers. It says, then said the king to Ittai the Gittite, as I said, he's one of David's captains. Wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place, abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and not an exile. He says, listen, Absalom's not after you. If you side with me, he's going to be after you, but he's not after you. It says, whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us, seeing I go whither I may? Return thou and take back thy brethren, mercy and truth be with thee. So he says, you just got here, you walked into this mess. I mean, it's not on you, go back. All right, take your guys with you. All right. And Ittai answered the king and said, as the Lord liveth, as the Lord the king liveth, surely in the place my Lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will my servant be. And there it is. This Ittai the Gittite says, wherever you are, if you're in the palace, if you're on the run, I'm going to be with you. I'm with you. I'm on the side of the king. There you go. There is the proper assessment of what's going on here. All right. In the end, David's going to win. All right. In the end, he's going to win this because he's the king and God's hands on him. But right here, you got right in the middle of this insurrection, you got to be smart on which side you're going to pick. It said, and David said to Ittai, go and pass over. And Ittai the Gittite passed over, and all his men and all the little ones that were with him. That is, he's got all his family with him. He's got everybody with him. If you can imagine this, David and his entourage and the Gittites here and the Cherethites and the Pelethites and Benaiah and these 600 soldiers, and they're all just leaving Jerusalem because behind them is his son, Absalom. It says, and all the country with a loud voice, listen, and all the country went with a loud voice, and all the people passed over, and the king also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. And lo, I got some time here. And lo, Zadok also and all the Levites were with him bearing the Ark of the Covenant. The priests are on the side of the king. There's something else to pay attention to. All right? Everybody knows what happened, but they're going to side with the king. They're the Lord. They understand who David is. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until the people were done passing out of the city. Now, they're going to take the Ark of the Covenant with David out of town is what this is all about. All right? David's not going to have this. He doesn't think this is the right thing to do. Now, you'd think that he would just say, yeah, come on, but he doesn't. He said, and the king said to Zadok, carry back the ark of God into the city. If I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he shall bring me again and show me both it and his habitation. That is, if the Lord's going to bless me in all of this, because he's not presuming, the Lord is. He's not presuming. He's not sure what's going to happen here. But the ark needs to stay in Jerusalem. That's the point. He said, but if he thus say, see, this is what David is thinking about God. God can bless me in this, and then I'll be back, and that's good. But God might say, after all this is going on, I have no delight in thee. He might say, I've had it with you, David. That's what he might say. David is thinking along the Old Testament way. He's thinking in the Old Covenant way. If you do good, you're blessed. If you do bad, you're cursed. I've asked for forgiveness. The Lord has forgiven me. There's these terrible implications of what's happening because of what I did. I mean, this might be the end of everything. So he's saying, if I come back, it should be here. And if God is done with me, I mean, this is his assessment to Zadok. But if he, that is God, does say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here am I, let him go to me as seemeth good unto him. That is, he said, I'm here. If it's for me to die in this conflict with my boy, everybody knows where I am. All right. And the king said also unto Zadok the priest, art thou not a seer? Return unto the city in peace, and your two sons with you. Ahimaaz thy son and Jonathan, the son of Abiathar. Zadok's got a son, and Abiathar has a boy. This is going to be big. He sends the priests back with the ark. All right. And then he says this in verse 28. And this is, I said there's a scheming all in here and the intrigue of this. Here it is. So he sends the priests back that are on the side of David. But the priests have high profile jobs. I mean, everybody keeps an eye on them. But they have two boys. The boys here names, and one of is Ahimaaz thy son, and Jonathan is the son of Abiathar. So you got Jonathan and Ahimaaz, which are the two boys of the priests. And, you know, their schedule isn't as structured. Okay, nobody's keeping really that close a check on the boys, not like they are on the priests, right? It says, "See, I will tarry in the plain of the wilderness until there come word from you to certify me, to make sure that everything is the way it should be, because right now things are just in a muddle." Zadok, therefore, and Abiathar carried the ark of God again to Jerusalem, and they tarried there. So they took the ark back. Now listen to this. Excuse me. Excuse me. This is David's scheme. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. David saying, you got to be kidding me. Ahithophel's on the side of Absalom. The wisest guy that speaks as an oracle of God sided with my son. The betrayer. Here it is. He betrayed me. He's siding. He knows all my inner counsel. And he's on the side of my son, who right now is my enemy. He said, and one told David, saying, Ahithophel among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Oh, yeah, because he is a smart guy, and with him on the side of Absalom, I'm in a jam. He prays, turn his counsel into foolishness. This is what we call an imprecatory prayer. And I've heard guys talk about why we don't pray imprecatory prayers. I just want you to know, as we're talking this morning, I pray imprecatory prayers. I pray them all the time. I pray that those that would scream to destroy our nation fall into their own nets and their own snares and into their own pits. And that the evil will eat itself up and will never impact the American people. I pray that all the time. I pray that evil comes to an end, all right? And those that are propagating this evil, in their devices and all the wickedness that they're proposing, that as they follow this path of wickedness, that the path of wickedness will in itself swallow them up, and it will have no impact. All right, that they'll get bad counsel. All of that, the people will give them bad counsel, and decisions that will come to naught. Now you can say, well, I'm supposed to be praying for their salvation. I understand that. I understand but the whole idea here is Ahithophel is not a nobody. We already know who he is. It's like if God wants to save the guy, he knows enough about it. He is Judas. I don't know how to get this across. How much of the gospel did Judas hear? The real Judas. How much of the gospel did he hear? I mean, apparently when he was set out with the 12, 2 by 2, he was able to do miracles. Judas, he's a lost guy. He's the son of perdition. He knows more about the Lord than any of us will ever know. He walked with the Lord, and he's in hell. He's in his own place. I mean, I don't know. I'm afraid that in our tradition, my tradition, that we still would have had people handing tracts to Judas like he doesn't know about the gospel. That's all I'm trying to say. Oh, no. Ahithophel knows everything he's doing. He knows the gospel. He knows the faith. He knows who the king is. And against all of this, he is a traitor. He's a traitor. That is who he is. He is a traitor. So I'm praying that the traitor here, traitors, come to their end. That's all I'm trying to say. If they're a traitor or if they're engaged in something wicked. He says, verse 32, and it came to pass that when David was come to the top of the mount, that is of the Mount of Olives, where he worshiped God, behold, Hushai, don't forget this name. This is Hushai. Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent and earth upon his head. So here we got another counselor. So here's the two guys that are going to be in play here. Ahithophel, who is the wicked betrayer, the type of Judas, and you got Hushai. His coat is rent because he can't believe this is happening to the king, unto whom David said, if thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden unto me. Don't come with me, and we're just heading for the hills. He says, but if thou return to the city, listen to this. Another one of these verses, I love this stuff. David says, go tell this guy a lie. I know you don't like, there's some of you out here, I know you don't appreciate it when I talk about this. I mean, the appropriate value of a lie. I have to ask you, does Absalom deserve the truth? There's some of you out there that are saying, yeah, it says not to bear false witness. I understand that. This is, again, in a time of war. In a time of war, does the enemy deserve the truth? I ask you that. If you're captured in a time of war, all right, what are you supposed to do? You give your name, rank, and serial number, and you do everything you can to resist answering the questions of your interrogator because it's going to bring the death of the men that you expose. So you do not tell them the truth. And if you're a spy, and there's spies all through the Bible, you're living a life of a lie. You see, this is one of the benefits of reading the Bible. Maybe we shouldn't read this because he tells them, go back to Absalom and tell him a lie and get inside as a spy for me. I'm only reading you what the scriptures say. That's all I'm doing here. He said, unto whom David said, if thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden unto me. But if thou return to the city and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king. He says, call my boy the insurrectionist the king. He says, as I have been thy father's servant hitherto, so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou, listen to this, then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. You're there to counter Ahithophel's counsel. You're there to counter Judas's counsel. So who shall you get in close by feigning your allegiance to Absalom? You stay close within the inner circle of counselors to Absalom. And when Ahithophel starts giving a good counsel on how to defeat me, you be there to counter it. Hushai, that's going to be your job. Give him counsel that will stop Ahithophel's. You need to present my case in the inner circle in a deceptive way. I told you I love this chapter. I mean, it's great stuff. So he says, and hast thou there with thee Zadok and Abiathar the priest. So they're staying behind too. These guys are on your side. Therefore it shall be that what thing soever thou shalt hear in the king's house, thou shalt tell to Zadok and Abiathar the priest. Just tell them. So now we have a means of communicating the spine. This is how we're going to do it. You find out what Absalom's thinking. You find out what his plans are. You relay these things to the priest, to Zadok and Abiathar, right? So now they're aware of it. So we have a chain of command of how to get the information out of the inner circle to me. It's not over yet. Tell the priest. And it says this. It says, wherefore it shall be that thing whatsoever thou shalt hear out of the king's house, thou shalt tell to Zadok and Abiathar the priest. Behold, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. It's not over yet. You tell the priest, those two priests have boys, and by them ye shall send unto me everything that ye can hear. That's how we're going to find out. I'm going to plant a spy right inside Absalom's inner circle. He's going to counter Ahithophel's counsel on how to destroy me, and I'm going to have intelligence right from Absalom through Hushai to the two priests, to their two boys, and their two boys are going to run and tell me. I'll tell you, this is great stuff. You need people to tell you what the enemy is doing. You need this. You need spies. You need spies to spy out the land. They're still doing it, all right? Then it goes on. So Hushai, David's friend, and there you have it. Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem, and that's how that ends. And I went really long, well, not really long, but longer. Anyway, there you go. That's chapter 15. What a chapter. What a chapter. I hope it challenges a lot of the things that you might be thinking, because you're saying to yourself, if you start putting moral characteristics on this, which the Bible never does, none of these guys, Hushai, Zadok, Abathar, Jonathan, Ahimaaz, all of these moles in Absalom's court, God never says, and because you have been born false witness and because you have been falsely represented yourself, that there's judgment coming your way. No, that's not what happens. And indeed, it goes the other way. I mean, they're all going to be blessed for this. All right. So it might be tough to factor this all in, but remember, this is all happening in a time of war. This is happening in a time of war, and this is what you do when you need intelligence on the enemy. And the Bible gives us principles here on how to make sure you don't take everybody with you. You leave somebody behind. They feign allegiance to the leader takes them in. Now you have a mole in the inner court, and you have a mechanism to get all that news back to David. Okay, that's it. Comments? Anything, whatever you have. All right. That would be great. So, it's Monday. We're off and running, aren't we? Okay. Well, Lord bless you. Lord willing, I'll see everybody tomorrow. I'll see everybody tomorrow. We'll see you. Bye.